Welcome to the Power of the Truth podcast with me, Fran Willoughby. I'm so glad you're here. Today I'm speaking with someone who truly understands what it means to live a lie and the immense courage it takes to step into your truth. My guest, Seamus Corry, shares his powerful story with raw honesty and grace. A quick word of care though before we begin. This conversation touches on some sensitive and potentially triggering topics, including religious conditioning, suicide and abortion. If at any point you feel you need support after listening, please do check the show notes. I've included links to organisations that can help. If you enjoy this episode, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps more people find these important conversations. So without further ado, let's dive in. I hope you find this honest exploration of the truth with Seamus Corry as moving and thought-provoking as I did. Let's go. Welcome, Seamus, to the Power of the Truth podcast. How do I introduce you? Gosh, we met probably 6 months ago and connected instantly over our love of all things spiritual and mental health and just our general vibe and energy, and it was an absolute no-brainer for you to come on my podcast. You have an incredible story to share, and I really feel so much of your story and your background is so relevant to my message, which is all about the truth, obviously. So lovely, Seamus Corry. For our new listeners, tell us, who are you?
I am, firstly, can I say, fully human. So I'm not an AI creation. I am a son, a brother, a father, grandfather. Professionally, I am a mental health practitioner, wellbeing consultant, podcaster like yourself. I have to mention best-selling international co-author, just to add that in. But I'm also an immigrant. I'm part of an Irish tradition and Irish culture who, because of various circumstances and choices, I found myself in the UK back in 1996.
So let's get straight into it.
Let's do it.
As you know, this podcast is about the truth, how we navigate that, the good, the bad, and the ugly, I'm afraid. Yeah. It's a huge topic and something that fascinates me. So I want to take you back to being a child in Ireland. Obviously living with a heavy emphasis on religion, which hugely shaped your future, I know. So just to give us a little bit of background about what that was, how old were you when you realised what your family wanted for you, if you would mind explaining what that was? And how did you feel about that at the time? How old were you when it clicked in?
Sure. I'll start by saying I had a wonderful childhood. Surrounded by green fields and the countryside, and I grew up in a small part of rural Ireland on the western seaboard, and the village I came from had only 900 people living in it. The church was very much at the centre of that village and centre of the community, and we lived our lives through the passing of the seasons, but also through the celebration of feast days and holy days, and really traditionally expressed Catholicism. I grew up in a family of 4 brothers and 1 sister with my mum and dad, and traditionally in Ireland at that time, my dad was the patriarch in the family. He was king of his own kingdom, and everybody was subservient to my father. Don't get me wrong, my dad was a wonderful guy, and in his own way loved us all as best he could, and so did my mum. But he was also a devout Catholic. He was also really heavily involved in religious life in the community. He was classed as an elder in the community as well, so everybody kind of looked up to him and everybody knew who my dad was. And he was this, always seemed to me, the senior figure. So we would always get people to the door talking to my dad and asking my dad for advice and guidance and support and information and all that kind of stuff. So I grew up with that. But I also, from a very young age, I was chosen to be a Roman Catholic priest in my family when I was newly born. So very soon after I was born, my dad, through his selection really, has said that everybody in an Irish family at that time, there was going to be one member who was going to either be a priest or a nun. So I was chosen for that.
And why you? What was the...
Yeah, depending who you talk to, Fran, it's like two people witness an accident on the side of the road, and two of them will have two different opinions and two different perspectives on that accident. My dad, as I said, was very devout, and the story goes that when I was newly born, I was born a little bit premature, so everything wasn't where it should be. And prematurity in Ireland back in the late 1960s was a difficult issue, and the technology that's available now wasn't available then. So it was almost like a process of watchful waiting to see through incubation if everything settled itself down, or if the baby or child survived. And if the baby didn't survive, well, then it was down to biological factors and the fact that the baby wasn't ready. So I was very much part of that ilk.
And obviously the fact that you did well in those circumstances, I presume, meant that you were a little miracle.
I was a little miracle, and my dad saw me as a little miracle. So he pretty much sent a prayer up to God to say, look, if my boy survives, I'll give him back to you, basically.
Right.
I'll give him back to you, you know.
You're a sacrifice.
Yeah, I was a human sacrifice, really. So, yeah, I did survive. Yeah, I was seen in the family as a little miracle. And from then on, he let it be known in the family and in the community that I was the chosen one. And
wow. So you grew up with that knowing. Do you ever remember a time when that wasn't your destiny, as far as they were concerned?
No, absolutely. All through primary school, all through secondary school, this was my destiny.
Do you remember ever questioning that and asking if that was what you wanted, or wishing you could do something else? Or was it just, this is what I've got to do, this is what my family says, and so this is where I'm going?
Again, I'll be very truthful with you. Primary school is primary school, and really you don't have real idea or understanding what it is you want to do, and you just get through the crayon stage to the pencil stage to the biro stage, and you get through that. I went on to secondary school, and I was very lucky to attend another Catholic secondary school called St. Joseph's Secondary School, which was very close to me. Now, it was a mixed school. I had both boys and girls on it, and I was 11 or 12 when I got to secondary school, and as you do, you kind of explore the territory, as it were, and you make friends, and you make close friends, and then you start to maybe explore and begin to explore and become aware of your own sexuality and what it means to be a boy. And you have feelings and you have emotions and all that sort of stuff. And when other of my friends were meeting up and having relationships, I thought, you know, why not? This is a perfect natural way to do that.
Yeah.
So I connected with somebody in secondary school, and she was a lovely girl, and we used to hold hands and maybe kiss occasionally, and it was just very innocent and nice, lovely. And that went on for about 4 or 5 months. And then one morning, I came to school as I always did, and I always looked out for her when I came to school, and we always sat together and all that sort of stuff. And she completely dinged me.
Oh.
Like completely ghosted me. Like literally ghosted me.
And at that age, it's devastating, isn't it? Devastating.
It's horrific.
Yeah.
It was horrific. It was emotionally devastating for me.
Yeah.
And I began to think, what have I said? What have I did? You know, has it been me? Has it been my, you know, but she would literally just sit at the opposite end of the class and not have anything to do with me. And I barely acknowledged my existence. And that continued for the remainder of secondary school. And I was devastated by that. And you begin to think, and I knew I was going to be a priest, and I knew I was going to go off to seminary. So I thought, maybe this is God's way of telling me that relationships aren't my thing, right? But it wasn't until much later, and we'll get to that, that I met up with her when she was older, and I said, look, take me back to, if you would, if it's not too upsetting, take me back to that time when we were going on. What happened? Was it something I said or did? And she said, no, it wasn't anything you said or did, but it was your dad. So I said, what? So my dad spoke to her mum and said, look, on no uncertain terms is your daughter should have a relationship with my son. So stay well clear.
Right. Because he's got this destiny and he needs to
Because
be
he's got this destiny, and don't you influence him in a bad way, and don't you distract him from his modus
his
operandi,
calling.
his
Yeah.
primary objective.
Yeah.
Turned out it wasn't my primary objective, though. It was my dad's.
Yeah.
My dad wanted it for me because my dad didn't have it for him, because he, through his own life, had the intention of becoming a priest, but was distracted by the beauty of my mother and went on to settle and have a family. But he always lingered. He always lingered for that opportunity to fulfill that destiny, and that destiny, as he saw it, was going to be fulfilled through me.
Gosh, Seamus, we often think, don't we, hear about parents living their dreams through their children.
Hmm.
But I've never heard about it in terms of religion in that
Hmm.
way. You think about it in terms of, people wishing they'd been a singer or a
Or
sportsman
a dancer,
or a
or
dancer
an
or
actor.
whatever, and
Yeah,
they
yeah.
live vicariously through their children and put all this pressure on them. But I guess that was probably in Ireland at that time quite a prevalent situation,
It was.
actually,
It was
just due to the
quite common.
nature and the status of having a son who was a priest, probably a bit like some people want their children to be doctors or lawyers or whatever because it boosts their social standing,
It does, yeah.
And I suppose
Yeah.
for your dad, that would have been huge for him to have a son who was a priest.
It would be stratospheric in terms of standing.
Yeah.
So, it would bring respect on the family. It would bring that level of power, as it
Yeah,
were.
power, yeah.
Power, my God, my
And
son.
as the patriarch, it would feed his ego in
It
that.
would, it
Yeah.
would, it
Yeah.
would. So you can see the dynamic at play in that process. Now, I was completely oblivious to that dynamic because I just absolutely accepted the fact that there was only one outcome for me, and that was going to be a priest, and then that's what it was going to be. And
Yeah.
after the devastating blow with the relationship at secondary school coming to an end, I thought, well, that's it then, isn't it?
That's it for you, yeah. And you
That's
just
it.
kind of accepted it, yeah.
You
And so,
but all the while, Fran, all the while not processing that trauma.
no.
That was the first time I experienced a real sense of anxiety or upset or shock, really, that somebody could be so blatantly cold
And
and
controlling, actually.
and controlling, yeah.
Mm.
But
And that,
again, I didn't know that at the time, so that started the whole process of trauma for me in my life.
but you don't
Or
understand at that age. You've got no
don't.
concept of that kind of misplaced parental intention or
No, no,
you don't understand about people doing things for their own gain necessarily in the same way. You don't have that emotional intelligence, especially boys. You
no.
don't have that emotional intelligence to be able to look past a situation and say, oh, well, he's doing that because, X, Y, Z. And obviously, that choice, the fact that you didn't have a choice, must have had a huge impact on your identity as
Yeah,
a person at
I
that
ha-
time.
yeah, I had a singular identity, and I identified as a seminarian, as a candidate for the priesthood.
Yeah,
That was my identity. I didn't identify as human. I didn't identify as male. I didn't identify as heterosexual. I identified as a prospective seminarian for the priesthood, and that was that.
yeah.
That was my identity. That was my definition. That's how I saw myself.
So I know it's a long story, but just briefly, what was the timeline of events that happened next? So how old were you? What happened once you were 16, was it?
Yeah, it kind of brings it up every time. This time of year is always GCSE results, and see the kids getting the results and being so elated and so happy with how they've done. For me, I got my results whilst in the car with my parish priest and my father taking me up to visit my new home, which was going to be the first seminary I attended. So I turned 16 on the 7th of August, 1987. And by the 4th of September 1987, I had entered the National University of Ireland and the Pontifical University of Rome in St. Patrick's College, Maynooth, on the 4th of September 1987.
Wow. And so you went to live there
Went to live
away?
there. It was as if I was a boarder, yeah. Yeah.
Right.
For
At
the
six,
first,
and you were just 16,
just,
literally.
just over the border at
Yeah,
16.
so you were young in your year. So that's a lot, isn't it, at 16 to be taken away, especially when you're living such a big family and you're used to that. And like you say, from such a small village and to be sent away, essentially, at that age
Yeah.
to somewhere that wasn't your choice, away from everything you knew and all your comforts.
Yeah.
And I know it wasn't a pleasant time for you, was it?
No, it wasn't. And let's be honest, I grew up in a traditional Catholic church environment in the village in which I grew up that was loving and caring and supportive and encouraging. And, people gave me gifts before I left and baked cakes. And it was that really homely, loving, caring support. And I grew up with that sense of spiritual nurturing. I grew up with really conscious that I was part of a spiritual community.
Yeah, the community is huge, isn't it? I mean, I do think the church get a lot wrong, but the one thing that they do well is that
Is that
it's that
community.
community and that love thy neighbor aspect
Yeah.
of it is that it keeps people together. Before we had the world of social media and podcasts and mobile
Oh, yeah.
phones and everything, that if someone didn't turn up to church on Sunday, went and
No.
checked on them,
You
right?
you went and checked. Yeah, you
Yeah,
checked.
and that was how you knew if someone was all right, if they turned up to mass, if they turned up. And I remember that as a child, that if someone wasn't around at Sunday school or whatever, or great auntie, whoever, you went and checked on them and made sure they were all right. And the church did do that well. So obviously, again, you're being wrenched away from this.
That womb of love and
Yeah,
care and wonderfulness that I had experienced up to that moment. And I expected
yeah,
quite
yeah,
innocently that I would get that in the seminary
yes.
which I went to. So it would be an extension of that. It would be a really loving, supportive, caring environment that nurtured me and that bring out the best in me, really.
Well, and I think if you've been part of something that is so focused on community and religion in that way, you would naturally assume that actually going to somewhere that is solely focused on that purpose would just be a more heightened version of what you already knew,
Yeah,
right? That it would be a more spiritual,
it,
more
it
loving,
would.
more
It would.
encapsulating, more everything.
It
But that
would.
wasn't the case, right?
No, it wasn't. On the 4th of September 1987, I entered with 121 other young people like me. 121, Fran.
Gosh,
100,
a lot.
121, I'll never forget. There's some numbers that just stick in your mind.
Yeah, for sure.
And 121 for me just sticks in my mind. 121 young people like me, all gathered like sheep in a fold, ready to begin our seminarian lives and begin our spiritual journey to achieve our destiny, which was ordination and become a priest. What we entered, though, was nothing short of a Catholic, Talibanistic, institutional, cruel, hard, bullying, very traumatic environment.
Shame.
Where almost from day one, uh, I use the analogy of the concentration camps in Germany and Austria during World War II, where the Jews used to be taken and used to be stripped of all their belongings and stripped of their identity and everything that they owned. And in the same way, the Catholic Church did the same to us, 121. So, I remember my mum and dad leaving. I remember seeing them off. And I remember there was a big old medieval castle door that had one of these smaller doors that
Yeah.
people walk through rather than opening the big doors. And you'll see it if you look at photographs of St. Patrick's College when you're in the cloister. And I still can hear that door banging as my parents left, as if to
Mm.
say, the last vestige of humanity has now left the building.
Yeah. Were you
And
scared?
I was frightened, really frightened. Not initially,
You
but
didn't know what it was going
I
to
didn't
be.
know. But you were surrounded by home comforts, for example, and you were surrounded by the things from home that were wrenched away from you right at the start, right at the beginning. You were taken up to a cell, really, a cell. All I could describe it as a cell with a 17th century bed with a mattress that was about that 10. There was no hot water, there was no showers, there was no heat. It was right at the top of the building. It was a cell.
If you think about going to live like in a monastery
Yeah,
where they take everything away from you so that you can
everything.
just be with yourself,
Yeah,
basically. That's
everything.
yeah.
Everything. And through the walls that first night, I could hear guys crying. I could hear boys like me crying. Do you know, the reality of what they've come to had finally just set in. And it was like a spiritual military boot camp then for the next 2 years. That when you see these celebrity SAS programs, are you strong enough? Are you tough enough? And people hand in their bandanas like after the first couple of hours and say, this is too tough. I can't walk up this hill. This is awful, by the way. Boys were actually giving up, that very next morning. People just said, fuck this, I'm away, and left.
Yeah.
And began to leave. So that in itself is a trauma because you can't make friends then. You can't really make connections. Your head is spiraling. You're just trying to survive. And I suppose from the very beginning of that process, I entered into a kind of survival mode mechanism because the authorities said, you can't leave. The gate is open. You can leave anytime you want. But and this is where the mental mind games start. I mean, where do you go to? Who will accept you?
Yeah, because I suppose in that instance, you're bringing shame on your family.
Yeah, yeah. So you can leave it. The boys that absolutely took that board and left very early doors. I would say we're extremely courageous and extremely brave because somebody like me, I lived in fear. So I was very much in survival mode for the first 2 years of my seminary life.
So how long were you? So you were there for 2 years.
I was there for 2 years, but I need to put it in context for you. And here's where it really messes with your head. So for the first month, we were completely isolated in that kind of boot camp environment. Now,
Right.
St. Patrick's College, Maynooth in Ireland, is attached to a national university. So the national university population returned in October of that month.
Right.
So that's a fully fledged university, where all the kids go to do degrees and diplomas across the board, right?
Yeah.
In essence, I also remember the statistic of 13 girls to every boy in that university. And we were a microcosm in the middle of that university campus, being expected to remain aloof from that.
And set an example.
Set an example. We're the seminarians. We should know better. Now, Fran, I'm 16. For the first time in a libertarian university, surrounded by all that noise and
Temptation,
yeah, and distraction.
yeah.
Right? And as soon as that kind of university life returned, a lot of guys fell off the wagon very quickly. A lot of boys fell off the wagon very, very quickly.
What do you mean by that? Fell off the wagon? What were they doing?
Yeah, they crossed the line. They went over the wall. They decided that religious life wasn't for them and the libertarian life.
And do you think a lot of that was to do with the celibacy kind of expectation?
Yeah, absolutely. 100%.
As a sole reason, or was it the alcohol? Was it
It's the fun, the nightclubs, the dancing,
yeah,
the cheap booze at the student
union? Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's your atypical university environment that a group of guys were asked not to participate in.
Yeah.
It's like seeing the carrot cake, but saying you can't eat the carrot cake.
Yeah.
It's there in front of you, but you can't have it though.
I suppose in their minds, that's the test, right? That's the test. Are you going to make it? Are you going to be strong enough of conviction to make it? It's like this battle of internal wills.
Yeah.
Because only a few will make it.
Yeah, absolutely. But there's also the mental mind games happening at a philosophical level within our training at that time, because our first 2 years of philosophical training was all about denying the existence of God.
Oh.
God was just a human construct in order for us to feel better, discuss.
Right.
So God doesn't exist. Philosophers have proved that God doesn't exist. So like you were certainly faced, somebody like me with a really loving faith, certainly been really challenged out of my box.
Hold on, because that for me, now we're talking about the truth.
Yeah.
That's the whole concept of this podcast. So they were basically telling you in that moment that everything you've ever believed was a lie.
Yeah,
Yeah.
everything was shit. Everything was shit.
And so you're going, holy shit, like literally.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
what do I believe now? So you have to, it is that kind of that way of, like you say, brainwashing, that mental kind of mind games that they're going, right, we're going to make you justify to yourself why you believe this. This
yeah,
is going to be your truth, and you have to prove to us and yourself why it's the truth.
yeah,
And you genuinely, in that moment, you believed what you'd been conditioned to believe, right?
100%.
Yeah.
And when you've got like, these learned men and learned professors and these religious icons, you're coming to you and say, listen, do you know what? See that stuff that you've grown up with, by the way? It's all shit. Don't believe that. You're in the big game now. Those small ideals and beliefs won't cut the mustard any longer.
Wow. You have
You've
to
got,
be able to back up your evidence, basically,
you
so that
have
when you're
to.
challenged in the real world by people who don't believe, the skeptics, you have to be able to stand your ground and say, look, I've done the research. I know the science.
Yeah,
This is why I believe what I believe, right?
yeah. And you're absolutely right. And then on top of that, so you've got the university influence pulling you in one direction. You've got the church influence pulling you in another direction. You've got me in survival mode, just fucking trying to survive on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
Uh,
And the
and
pressure of your family,
and the
knowing that they're,
yeah, and the external pressure. So I would come home on holidays and half days and holy days and Christmas and stuff, and they would say, "How's everything going?" I would say, "It's grand, it's fine. Yeah, I'm really enjoying it." But the reality was, I was in the agony most of
yeah,
the time. I was in that mental agony. The Third World War in my head was going off on a daily basis, and
yeah.
I'd nobody to talk to about that.
And was that because you were questioning your beliefs,
Yeah.
or yes,
Yes, absolutely. I questioned everything. I questioned my own existence.
yeah,
I questioned who I was. I questioned who I believed in. Did I have a calling? Did I have a vocation? Is this really true? Did God really call me? Does God even exist in the first place? Is God just a mental construct that I've just constructed in my own head to make me feel better?
yeah,
Is
yeah,
this, I would just run around like blind sheep, the whole lot of us, being corralled into believing this by an institution that's all powerful, that controls its people by using fear and guilt.
yeah, yeah. And at 16, I genuinely can't imagine. I mean, we talk about our kids being under pressure nowadays,
Yeah.
but actually, I can't imagine what that must have been like for you at that age, on your own, away, that pressure, that loss of identity,
Mm.
the temptation. Did you fall off the wagon at any point secretly?
Of course, I went over the wall many times, Fran. I
Did
went
you?
over the wall many times. I had
Good
a,
lad.
I found everybody needs a release valve, right? And so for some of the guys in there, it was alcohol, and for some of the guys in there, it was drugs, and for some of the guys in there, it was sex, and for some of the guys, for me, it was music. Music was my savior. And I joined a group of musicians, and we played both internally in the college, but also externally at the local pubs, and that was just wonderful.
It was freedom.
It was freedom, yeah. It was freedom to express me in the way that I knew that particular time, the only way that I knew definitively, and that was through the expression of my music.
And you could lose yourself in that moment and
I
forget
could
that
lose,
all the other stuff was happening.
could absolutely. I'm eternally grateful that I didn't drink at that time, because if I drank, I'd probably be an alcoholic now, or more than likely, I'd probably be dead.
Mm,
And we can kind of get to that. But not using alcohol or drugs, I use music as a real fusion, and I just enveloped myself in music and surrounded myself with music. And this for me was my cushion. And I had some really great experiences and some really shocking moments where we had a wall that around the perimeter of the university, but there was weaknesses in the wall, as it were. And if you knew where the weaknesses were, you could get over and back. But that's a wee bit more difficult when you're a little bit more inebriated. And I remember coming back with a friend of mine one night who was very inebriated, and he saw that the wall that he was climbing on was far higher than he thought it was because he was drunk. And so he froze on the wall. And obviously, the dogs were out in the security details patrol, and we knew when they patrolled and how they patrolled. And the dogs were out, so you had to avoid the searchlights and avoid the dogs and avoid security in order
Sounds
to
like
get in and get
prison.
a. Very much so, yeah, very much so.
And a hard-hitting question, was there physical abuse in this place?
Yeah, there would have been, yeah, there would have been. There would have been, yeah. There was a lot of bullying, there was a lot of harassment, mostly carried out by the guys older in maturity on the younger ones. So it was always a form of condition, always a form of condition. There was also quite an emphasis on, um, again, let's just call the truth for what it is. Homosexuality within the church is a real thing.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
And I have no issue with homosexuality. I have no issue with somebody being gay or being a lesbian. Absolutely no problem with that. But what I do have an issue with is gangs playing on the vulnerabilities of younger guys who may be confused about their sexuality and being conditioned into believing that they are gay, and seeing the devastation of that, and how that can end up affecting
People in older life, yeah, for sure. If they
on
make
older
it
life.
that far, quite frankly.
If they make, and let's be honest, and we were speaking truth today, a lot of them didn't. A lot of them took their own lives and through the confusion and or used alcohol or drugs in order to leave this world. And
Were the suicide rates high at that university?
they weren't, because any difficulties were removed. No, as you would remove a boil from skin that didn't fit the brief. So people were removed very quickly.
So how long were you there? So you were there, you did your 2 years initially till you were 18.
Now, I did
Then
my 2 years. I did have a wee fleeting relationship with somebody again, and it was very innocent. It lasted, again, very, very short. It was in secret, so my family didn't know, nobody knew. It was me just exploring again this sexual part of my life. It didn't involve any degree of sexual intercourse, something that was really innocent, holding hands and kissing. But, I came to the summer. She went off to Japan, and I came home that summer in 1990, and I said to my family, that's it, I'm done, I'm finished. I'm not going back. It's done. I hate the place. The place is a shithole. It's a crock of shit. Everything's a crock of shit. And you can imagine how that went down in my family when I came back.
yeah. So then what?
Then my dad didn't speak to me for 6 months. My stuff remained in an outside shed. It didn't even come into the house.
And had you been ordained at that point? No.
No, this was my first 2 years of preparation, really.
So this was your first kind of experience of pushback,
Yeah. So
of being truthful about what you wanted and, really being honest with your family about how you felt about what they were putting you through.
Absolutely. And
the response was zero tolerance.
Don't want to hear it.
So then what? So then you pushed back. Your dad didn't speak to you for 6 months. Did you stay at home in that time?
I did, and staying at home was really, really difficult. And I managed to get myself a kind of training opportunity. I went off to do a little bit of further training, and my plan was to get myself a job and get a qualification and all that sort of stuff. But I could not bear the atmosphere at home. It was just a million times worse than what it would have been at the seminary.
Right. So you went back.
So I went back, but this time I decided my intention was to prove this thing one way or the other, right? But I didn't need any distraction. I didn't need any other outside influences. I needed a pure experience, right?
And you decided you were going to have that, presumably.
I decided I went to have that. No, I picked the Marine Corps of all Irish seminaries to get that experience.
Wow.
Yeah, I went fucking SAS. I went rogue. I went to the toughest seminary that ever.
Why?
Because I wanted to prove, right? Because I had the idea in my head that I didn't have a vocation.
Right.
Because my body, my mind, my spirit told me that I didn't have a vocation, right? But nobody believed that I didn't have a vocation, because everybody was led to believe that I was miraculously called by God, and this was, superimposed in terms of my psyche, and I was surrounded by this wonderful heavenly aura, and that I was going to be a priest. I didn't believe that, but I wanted somebody else to tell my family and community that this was a
So you
crock.
went to the most difficult place for you to succeed in order for you to fail so that you could come home.
Exactly.
Okay,
So
fine.
then the responsibility would be on that someone to say that, do you know what? Doesn't really cut them off.
This is not for this guy. He's not for us.
Yeah, this is not for this guy. He's not for us, mate. And push me out like they did to so many others.
What an interesting response. It's quite clever, actually.
Yeah.
Like that you succeeded, which
I thought it was quite clever. It was quite clever, right? And I thought my intention was. So I went back in September 1990, and I was signed up, shaved my head. Everything was black. Everything was really religious, almost monk-like. We wore a habit 24/7.
Yeah.
You could not identify as a seminarians if you were in that town, right? But there was no other distraction, Fran. And I thought they're going to see through me by October. Right, these guys know their shit, and they can see falsity at a mile distance. So they're going to see that I don't have it, and they're going to send me home in October, half term, and then I'll come home at half term and say, "Look, told you so, right?" And I'm not saying it this time. This is what they're saying. I don't have it, so I'm just going on and live my life for the rest of my time, because I had to know one way or the other.
Yeah.
So half term went to Christmas, and I'm going, fuck's sake, have they not just make a decision?
Yeah.
So Christmas went to spring, and by
still there,
and I suddenly thought to myself, honestly, and it was like almost like a personal revelation. Maybe I was wrong.
Maybe this is my destiny.
Maybe I do have a vocation. Maybe God is calling me to be a priest.
And was this place as abusive and prison-like as the others, or was it because you were older, this was more of a choice?
This was more of a choice. I had all that minute experience behind me, good, bad, and the really ugly.
Yeah.
So this was very much a choice. You chose to shave your head. You chose to wear black. You chose to identify as a seminarian. You chose that up until somebody told you different.
Yeah.
Up until somebody pulled you aside and said, you know what, mate? We've looked at your profile. I'm sorry, but you're not cutting the mustard. It's like, again, like several liberty essays where they pull you into a room and go, do you know what? No, the team's pulling you, mate. You've not got what it takes. See you later. Have a nice one. Give me your armband. And
yeah. So you were here until what? You were 21?
I was ordained prior to that. So I accepted the reality of my situation finally, and I found a degree of peace with that, saying, okay, I must be completely wrong about that. I must be completely wrong about the fact that I don't have a vocation. Obviously, God knows better. These guys know better. They've been doing it for 176 years. They know their shit.
Yeah.
How could they be wrong? And the year before I was ordained, one of my best friends took his own life in the seminary.
Oh, Seamus, I'm sorry. That must have been horrible.
Sorry.
Oh, Seamus.
It was devastating. And I use the word as sparingly as I can, because it was just, the world just collapsed around me. He was only 21, 22, his whole life ahead of him. We had watched a bit of TV together one Saturday night. We had laughed, joked, we had eaten crisps, we had drank juice. We had laughed at the TV. I think I remember it was the Eurovision that was on. Yeah, I know it may shock you to believe that the only good programs available in Ireland at that time were the Eurovision Song Contest.
Yeah, well.
So we had a Eurovision night, right? And so we all went off to our respective rooms, and sometime between the hours of 11:45 on Saturday night and 6 a.m. when he was found on Sunday morning, Michael decided to take his own life, and he hung himself.
Oh my goodness.
In front of the crucifix in the community hall in the seminary, so that he had worked it out and worked out the weights and worked out the measures and worked out the best method and worked out the knots. And he had written a card. It was Mother's Day on that Sunday. And his mother received the card on Monday that he'd written on the Saturday that she received on the Monday. And all the card said was, "Mum, I'm sorry."
Oh, Seamus. So it was very premeditated. He knew he was going to.
He knew. It was really difficult. It was a really difficult time. So there was a full inquest and full post-mortem, and it turned out Michael had some degree of mental health challenges or mental health difficulty. Wasn't quite sure whether it was bipolar or some degree of schizophrenic disorder. But he couldn't get this diagnosed, because if he did diagnose it, that would preclude him from priesthood. He couldn't be a priest then.
Right.
So he had all the pressure of his mental health condition, plus all the pressure to diagnose or not diagnose, and he must have internally suffered with that.
And were you aware of this mental health problem?
No, we only became aware of it subsequently as part of an inquest into his death.
Wow.
Yeah,
And you'd already been ordained at that point, had you?
This was a year before my ordination. And to be honest, Fran, all I wanted to do then was just get out of Dodge and get out of the seminary and get ordained and get on, because to be in that seminary and in that environment,
With those reminders, I suppose.
Constant reminders. The empty chair and the empty pew and the empty space at class, and it was constant.
So traumatic at such a young age.
Incredibly traumatic, absolutely incredibly traumatic.
And I'm sure in that moment you're then questioning your faith, his faith. My mother lost 2 children, and I know one of the reasons I'm as spiritual as I am is because from a very young age my mum questioned why. How do you take a 6-year-old? If there is a God, why do you give a 6-year-old cancer? Why do they die? I think she'd come to the conclusion that he'd fulfilled whatever purpose he'd come to achieve in that short life, and that he'd brought so much joy. And she really believed in reincarnation and in the fact that he would come again, and that he was living a lesson or whatever he'd come to do, whatever it was that he'd come to do in that life. His time was up and he'd gone. And in her mind, that justification or that reasoning or explanation gave her some peace. So from a really young age, that conversation was a constant, not constant, we didn't talk about it all the time, but it was a discussion point in my house. So this idea of spirituality, not necessarily religion, but spirituality in terms of there being something else or a higher purpose or a something that meant that we had this preordained existence. It was a conversation. It was something that was debated in my house. And I don't remember a time when that wasn't a conversation for us. But I can imagine for you in those circumstances, especially training and wanting to go into that line of work, again, you're then challenged, aren't you, with, if there is a God who is all good and all seeing and all knowing, why would he do this?
Absolutely.
And you're questioning your faith all over again, aren't you?
You absolutely are. You go into that question mode. And what it also does is that the traumas I'd already experienced that had remained unprocessed are further embedded with every new trauma that comes on board.
Yeah.
So it's like trauma upon trauma upon trauma upon trauma, that all of it just remains unprocessed. And you're not aware of it, but there's a ticking time bomb going off internally in me that at some stage, maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but soon, it's going to blow if it's not managed.
Yeah.
And the irony was that the institutional church didn't see that. So they focused on what they could focus on and getting people ordained and getting people through it, rather than focus on what needed to be focused on, which was giving individuals like me who were affected by Michael's suicide the opportunity.
In fact,
to process it.
as my young son's away at sixth form college He went at 16 through his own choice and he's similar. He's an August baby too. So it was a big shift for him this time last year. We were preparing for him to go away. And actually, towards the end of last year, there was a suicide in the halls.
Suicide numbers in our country are going up 6% every year across
So sad.
every demographic.
Obviously, for anyone listening to this, if any of this is triggering you in any way,
help and support available.
There is help and support available, and I'll make sure that all of that information's in the show notes, obviously.
Absolutely.
So just to fast forward a little bit further on, I thank you for sharing that, Seamus. I really appreciate it. It's such a hard subject. So then you were ordained the following year.
Yeah, the year before, I got a wonderful opportunity, which was part of my training and development, to go to a parish to, as it were, practice what I'd been taught and participate in services. And as a deacon, I was ordained a deacon the year before I was ordained a priest. So as a deacon, you could marry people and you could baptize people, and wonderful. So I got sent over to Wembley in London.
Wow.
From Ireland, right? And it'd been my first time in the big smoke, first time in London, first time living in Wembley, first time in a big city.
Yeah.
And Fran, I absolutely loved it because, yes, I was a deacon, but nobody knew me, Fran. Nobody knew me. I love that sense of anonymity that I had.
I remember that. When I moved to London from Yorkshire, I remember that anonymity, and I remember that feeling very specifically. So I know exactly what you mean. Coming from a small community or village to that, it feels like freedom, doesn't it?
It does feel like freedom. Yeah. And I absolutely loved it. I used to get a day off in the parish every week, and I used to just hop on the tube and get an all-day ticket, and I would just take off. I found it really liberating to have that sense of complete and total anonymity, that I could be anything that I wanted to be, because nobody gave a shit.
But that was your first taste.
That was my first taste, right?
That was the carrot, the dangling carrot.
That is the carrot, right? And so you try to put it back in the box when you come back after 6 or 7 weeks, but you've got the smells and tastes and sounds and senses of London in your head, and you find it really unsettling to come back to a rural community where everybody knows your business. Back doors are open, front doors are open, everybody knows every movement that you've made in that village in the last 150 odd years of your family life. Do you know what I mean? So it was very difficult to resettle back, but I did the best I could. But that feeling stayed with me, just like a seed. It was just planted there.
And everything when you come home feels so slow, doesn't it?
Yeah, and small. Everything felt small. And I felt sometimes I couldn't breathe, and I needed to escape to the big city, which for us was Limerick, which was next door. And I just needed that sense of anonymity.
So you'd been ordained.
I'd become a deacon on the 11th of June, which was my mum and dad's wedding anniversary, ironically, in front of 14 bishops, an archbishop, and 300 and odd priests, and 2,500 people in a cathedral. One morning at 11 o'clock until 1 o'clock in the afternoon, I was ordained a Roman Catholic priest.
Wow, that is a lot of people.
Huge amount of people. There was 14 of us finally that made it through. 14, Fran, out of the original 121.
Crikey. And so this big event, I guess it was a huge celebration. Your dad was like, yes.
Dad was in his element, right? The very next day, the ordination obviously was in college. So it was the college's cathedral where that took place. So that evening, I had a kind of wedding breakfast, as it were, and there was 170 guests invited. So it was like the proper speeches and cutting the cake and gifts and all that kind of stuff. And the next day, obviously, traditionally, as a newly ordained priest, you celebrate your first mass in the community in which you come from.
Right.
And everybody, Fran, turned out to that. Even my ancestors rose from the dead to be at that celebration. I am convinced I saw my great-great-grandparents and my grandparents in the congregation for that celebration. And it was the first mass, so it's the full regalia again. The church is packed. There's a party afterwards, and it's wonderful. So, you know, we Irish, we like to party, so partied well.
Yeah.
I remember the dynamic with my dad up to that had been, Dad was very supportive and he listened and he engaged and he coached and he advised and all that kind of stuff. And he was just being my dad in the best way possible. But when I became an ordained priest, I noticed that something changed in that. And sadly, what I saw change in that, he no longer saw me as his son, but saw me as his son, the priest.
Yes.
No, that's a fundamental shift.
Was there any change in the way that he spoke to you, the way his respect for you in terms of you were now higher standing than him?
He wasn't jealous of that. But what Dad did become, in terms of my experience after that, was he became my pimp, really. Because he used to pimp me out to people's houses. Very soon after I was ordained, very soon after my first Mass, I got into my first parish, and we'll talk about that. But I used to come home after a week's work and he used to say, right, you need to go and, celebrate Mass in that house.
Oh, you were paid by the Catholic Church. So you were
Yes.
employed by the Catholic Church because you'd been ordained.
Yeah.
So you had a wage and you were basically at the beck and call of your community, of your congregation.
I felt like a religious prostitute, really,
Wow.
doing religious favours.
So just fast forwarding again, so you're living in your community, your dad's pimping you out left, right, and centre to go and solve the community's traumas, problems. You were this voice of reason, comfort, support, whatever that looks like to the people in your community.
Yeah.
When did you decide, I'm not doing this anymore?
Yeah, it was my first parish I got was a rural parish, and I didn't have any problem with that. But what they don't prepare you for in terms of religious life is the loneliness you're going to experience after the hype settles down. So I'm a newly ordained priest. I'm just turned 24. I've got all this kind
You're
of
24 by the time you get to that point. So you've gone 8 years of training, essentially.
Indoctrination, yeah. You're ordained, you come out and you're expected to deliver.
So you said no one prepares you. You lost your train of thought. No one prepares you for what?
The reality of the situation. Nobody
Which is
acute loneliness, acute struggle, acute silence, acute isolation, while at the same time trying to be the front face of the church in that community, supporting people,
love, hope, joy.
love, hope, joy, faith, being with people at their lowest time and at their joyous time, and being expected to deliver a ministry and a service based on that perspective. And all the while, I had a huge, overwhelming sense of imposter syndrome. Because I felt like an imposter, I felt like being in the wrong body. I felt I was out of time, Fran. I was out of time. That this is not where I should be. But the other side of my brain, almost I became bipolar in terms of my mental focus. And one side of me said, yeah, you are, because the church proved that you are, you do have this vocation. And the other part of me says, no, man, you're making it up. You're a joke. You're a joke yourself. You're an imposter. You're a false prophet. You're talking shite. The stuff that's coming out of your mouth is absolutely shite, because guess what? You don't really believe it anyway, do you? So you're constantly dealing with that duality in your head, while at the same time trying to be the front face of a church, supporting and being the spiritual father in terms of that community.
So in your mind, you're battling with the fact that you feel like you're lying about who you are.
Yeah.
Although you'd obviously made the cut, 14 people. It's like when I was at drama school, only 5% of you will ever work in the industry. I can imagine it's a similar thing. Only this percentage of you are ever going to make the cut, will actually become a priest. Who's going to do it? That's sold to you as success.
Yeah, absolutely, right. You think, you've made it. And I woke up the morning after my ordination and thought, I woke up in my room all on my own, and my vestments were hanging on the door, and my first thought in my head was, what the fuck have I just done?
Yeah, because you think, right, I've made it. Now what?
Now what? I've achieved everything in life. 23 years old, I've achieved everything in life.
Yeah.
I've achieved
And it's that, I suppose it's anticlimactic, isn't it? Because that anticlimax of being in that space and going, right, I've made it. I've done everything they've asked me to do, and I've got to this point. Oh, this isn't quite what I expected it was going to be. I don't feel like I'm this supreme being connected to God.
absolutely.
It feels like a lie.
It does feel like a lie. And it felt like a lie.
And so, how long was it between that moment of when you were ordained to that seismic shift for you in your mind when you went, no, not doing it? How long?
It was 15 months.
Really?
Yeah.
And how many parishes did you go through in that time?
2.
Okay.
And, we talk about the power of the truth, and power of the truth, I was in real trouble. I was in real trouble mentally. I was in real trouble emotionally. I was in real trouble traumatically. I didn't know how much trouble I was, but I was in a lot of trouble.
And what was the shift? Do you remember that moment when you went, no, I'm going?
And I suppose when you're so vulnerable, Fran, and when you're so confused, and when you lose your sense of identity and lose the sense of who you are, you will reach out and grab the first bit of love and support that you get. And I did end up having a sexual relationship with somebody in the parish.
Right.
Which ended up in a pregnancy, which ended up in an abortion that I paid for.
Wow. And that, I'm sure, tipped you over even further.
I was gone after that. I was gone after that. I was so in fear and in trepidation, being completely anxious. I tried to hide it, tried to hide the relationship, tried to hide my involvement, tried to hide the consequences of that relationship, but it all eventually came to the ears of the bishop, who challenged me initially, and initially I denied it, but the evidence itself became overwhelming, and at which point I had decided to take my own life.
Oh, Seamus.
Rather than
And face the music.
rather than face the music, yeah. So I ended up one day just getting into my car and driving, and my plan was to drive myself off the face of the planet, just to crash into the nearest hill or drive over a cliff or just end it. So I had a really strong sense of suicidal ideation. And for some reason, we talk about being spiritually led, or we talk in moments of crisis, seeing the appearance of people who just come into our sphere or circle of influence. And for me, I cannot remember that drive that I took. I cannot remember. I had a complete, total blackout, Fran. And when I came to, I was parked outside one of my friend's house that I'd been in college with, who himself was a priest, and we got on really well. And he brought me in and showed me some love and compassion, which led to reconnection with my own family, because I'd been missing for a couple of days and they didn't know where I was. Eventually getting that in contact with my bishop, and which led to me being withdrawn from the parish initially, and some counselling and support being put in place for me to come to terms with the reality of my situation.
Okay.
So my bishop and the church had provided me with a safe environment, a safe space to rest and recuperate, but also had put on support for me through two psychologists, and one was a psychologist, I think one was a psychiatrist, who over a period of 3 to 4 weeks supported me to come to terms with the reality of my situation.
Yeah.
Which was first and foremost, but secondly, they also needed to fundamentally find out why the program didn't work. So they were always brought in as spiritual technicians, performing open brain surgery without a anesthetic to find out what on earth happened this individual who we put through some really rigorous training, and what happened to end up in this state of affairs.
Who influenced you, Seamus? Who distracted you from your path?
Yeah, so they discovered as a result of prognosis that I didn't have any untoward mental health condition other than a profound sense of trauma that I experienced, and layered upon layered upon layered upon layered that they didn't deal with. They just assessed me as being post-traumatically stress disordered.
Okay.
But they didn't provide any additional support for that, because their role then was to provide a report to the bishop outlining in really truthful terms the current situation and their prognosis as a result of the situation was. So I was faced with two realities once that report came to the bishop. One, I could resign my priesthood and take responsibility for the consequences of my actions, or I could remain a priest but no longer work in the Republic of Ireland. So I would be hidden from view and sent to the remotest outpost you could imagine in Africa, which at that time was in Zimbabwe. And there I would live out the rest of my days ministering in the community and not being able to return home.
In disgrace.
In disgrace.
Wow. So you resigned?
So I did the decent thing. I took responsibility for my actions in the first.
You hadn't really even done anything wrong. That's the terrible thing.
I took responsibility. I owned up and said, yeah, this is me. This is what I've done. This is the reality. This is my truth. This is what I've done.
Yeah.
And I'll take responsibility for that. I'll take the consequences of my decision. Thank you, but no thanks. And I resigned on the 18th of March, 1996, following an intensive meeting with my bishop.
And at that point, I can imagine that was, for your family, the disgrace, I suppose. Your dad's lost his standing, hasn't he?
My dad couldn't accept it. He just couldn't accept the reality of the situation that I now found myself in. I accepted it because I had, looked at it for what it was and said, yeah, this is me. This is finally who I am.
And I can imagine in that moment you went, actually, my truth is, I don't want this. I don't want to be celibate for the rest of my life. I want love and relationships and companionship. And
yeah, I want to be married. I want a relationship. I want to love somebody. I don't want to live out the rest of my life in complete and total isolation, surrounded by nothing but sheer loneliness, and then at the end of my days be shoved in the box in the ground, and that's me. You've done your work. I don't want that. I wanted more in my life. That wasn't too much to ask, right? The irony, though, and this is the kicker. This is the kicker, Fran, and it goes back full circle to ask him the question: did they know? Did the church ultimately know that I wouldn't make the grade? Because there are ways and means of finding out. So at each and every turn of the wheel, as it were, in terms of my seminary career, we would regularly undertake psychiatric and psychometric evaluation to make sure that our personality type matched the requirements in terms of the role that we were going to take on board. Now, there was a report done when I first started, a report done when I went back to the SAS camp in 1990, a report done at the very end. So you're talking effectively 7 years apart in terms of those three reports. None of those counsellors spoke to one another, none of those psychologists spoke to one another, and all submitted independent, verified reports. And all those reports said, independently of one another, that I didn't have the personality type for priesthood and should be dissuaded away from a life of religious life into a more lay form of work.
Really?
Yeah.
And you found that out afterwards?
Yeah.
Disgusting, isn't it?
Yeah. So instead of taking that under advisement and taking responsibility for their actions, their own actions, they ignored the information that was clearly written in front of them in print. In fact, one of the reports said, we'll let God manage that. That was the response of the authority at that particular time. We let God manage that.
I mean, it's interesting because, so my next question is, in hindsight, did you think there were signs even early on that the priesthood wasn't your true path? And I suppose from the discussions that we've there was that first relationship,
Yeah,
the questioning, definitely signs. And which follows on to my next question was, which do you wish you'd had the strength to speak to your parents sooner when you were younger, or would it have just been too big for you?
it would have been too big. I mean, how can you say after years and years of conditions and years of belief that suddenly I didn't believe this stuff anymore? I didn't believe I had a vocation in the first place. I didn't believe I had a calling from God. Actually, I didn't really believe in God.
And the result was that you packed your bags and left and came to UK, right?
Yeah, on the 29th of April 1996, after being rejected by my family, after being rejected by my community, after becoming homeless, I became now in exile.
Because you'd resigned, you'd
Because I'd
spoken the
resigned,
truth.
but there was also so much shame associated with what I'd done that my family couldn't accept it.
Yeah.
They couldn't accept the reality of that
And
situation.
you were carrying that even at such a young age, at 25.
Yeah, I was. So I carried all that.
So you put everything you owned in 2 suitcases?
I sold everything I owned, Fran. I literally sold everything I owned. And the remaining was in 2 suitcases. And my bishop, who continued to support me, actually stayed in the bishop's house for a period of time because I didn't have anywhere else to stay. It was either going to be the bishop's house or out in the street, really, to be honest, because that was the reality.
And was he kind to you?
He was lovely. And I will always be eternally grateful to him for his kindness and for his love and for his compassion and for his forgiveness.
Yeah.
And that he understood quite clearly from his perspective what had happened.
Yeah.
And in some sense, sought in some small way to remedy the situation, both providing support to me and providing support to the other individual who I had been in relationship with.
Yeah.
And made sure that was happened for the longevity of his own ministry as a bishop.
So you packed everything in 2 suitcases, you came to the UK.
Yeah, the bishop had a cousin or a brother in a monastery in Nunra in East Lothian, which is a Cistercian monastery. And he said, what had happened was I had decided to resign, but my dad wouldn't accept the decision. My dad was really good friends with the bishop because they had been friends through sporting activities for years. So my dad put unbelievable pressure on the bishop to put pressure on me to make me change my mind. In order to satisfy both parties, the bishop had agreed that I should go to a monastery just for a bit of R&R, a bit of relaxation, a bit of reflection, as it were, to ensure that the decision I made was the right one for me for the right reasons. So I was packed off. I left Ireland on the 29th of April 1996, flew on a really jittery biplane that I believe was on its last legs from the Aer Lingus fleet, landed in Edinburgh Airport at 5 to 6 on the 29th of April, was met by the guest master of that particular monastery and drove for about an hour to that monastery in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of rural East Lothian, just outside Edinburgh. Yeah, and I was a stranger in a strange land, completely isolated, completely alone in another cell, as it were, surrounded by a country I didn't know. I didn't know anybody. I didn't know a single soul.
And were you honest with those people about why you were there? Did
Yeah,
you feel able to speak your truth about what had
yeah, I
happened?
did. I did. I had a formal discussion with the abbot and a formal discussion with the guest master and advised them what had happened and the circumstances which led to me arriving at their door. And they were very accepting of that and very welcoming of that. And
I can imagine you must have felt a huge sense of relief in that, and aside from the fact that you'd been excommunicated, essentially.
No,
Which,
that was to come. That didn't happen yet, but that was to come. That was the kicker. At that moment of time, there was no formal process to laicize me.
right.
But the abbot and guest master were really supportive. But they were dealing with somebody who was really broken, though. I was really broken, mentally broken, physically unwell, mentally unwell, spiritually unwell, emotionally unwell. I was broken as a person could be.
Yeah.
But at the same time, dealing with all the historic trauma that I experienced, plus the grief and loss of Michael's suicide, the loss of my unborn baby that I discovered may not have been mine anyhow, because the individual in question was not only seeing me, but she was seeing somebody else at the same time. So there was a potential situation where I might have been caught in a situation to help her out, basically. So I don't know if that baby was mine or not, but the reality was I had paid for her to have an abortion in England.
You had to deal with that.
And I had to deal with the
guilt
and the guilt of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that didn't happen in the monastery. So I was a broken person in a monastery, miles from nowhere, surrounded by nobody that I knew, in the middle of a strange world, in a strange land, and I didn't know a single soul apart from the guest master that I'd met that day.
I can't imagine what that was like for you.
Oh,
Even in that moment, though, were you relieved to be away from the life that you were in before? Was there a sense of relief, or were you just not even in any fit state to contemplate that?
I wasn't even in any fit state to contemplate that, because I literally didn't have 5 minutes of peace in my head. I was just going from one thing to another thing to another thing. Eventually, you're flying on a plane, getting to the UK, going to a monastery. And I remember sitting on the bed that particular night and going, what the fuck, by the way? Just what the fuck? Can I ever just get 5 minutes of peace? Just 5 minutes is all I need. My sense was everybody's rejected me. I've been cast off. I've just been rejected. My family's rejected me. My country's rejected me. I'm an immigrant. There is a process that you go through as an immigrant that immigrants will describe, a kind of depression that you go into, that you miss home, that you miss loved ones, you miss family, you miss friends, you miss everything that you knew and loved, because you're in a strange land in a strange country. So it's like they call it the immigrant blues, right? So I really went into a state, I would say, of really deep depression, to the extent that I thought, okay, I tell you what, nobody would miss me if I was gone anywhere, right? Maybe the only way I'm going to get 5 minutes of peace in my head is to take my own life and finish what I had started in that car, the months before.
So, how does it feel to live in your truth now in comparison to that? Because it is a happy ending, isn't it?
It is a happy ending.
And do you have any regrets about any of it, really? Obviously, the regret of the situation with the girl that you were seeing, that aside, obviously you don't regret resigning?
No. That moment of resignation for me was the moment of liberation.
It was pivotal.
It was pivotal, that moment when I stepped into my own truth for the first time in my life. I'll never regret resigning from the priesthood. I regret some of the circumstances that led up to that and the actions that I took. And I take, again, full responsibility for that. I've accepted that and come to terms with that as a part of my life and as part of my history, that serves as a good teacher for me. No.
But equally, people do desperate things when they're in desperate times.
And importantly, Fran, I've forgiven myself. For a long time, I didn't forgive myself. And for a long time, I was really hard on myself. And if a tree was felled in Amazon somewhere, it was down to the fact that I had resigned from the priesthood, and that it
brought shame on your family.
Brought shame on the family. And I was the center of all the world's problems, really, to be honest. And I have shifted away from that. My life has been, from that point of coming to the UK, a life of revelation and journey and discovery.
And it's ultimately led you to what you do now, which is the positive and wonderful and incredible work that you do. And you must be incredibly proud of the work that you do. Tell us a little bit more about what that looks like now, because ultimately, without everything that you'd been through, you wouldn't be where you are now, right?
No, I didn't have anybody. I provide that listening ear, and I provide that level of support, and I provide that guidance on the side.
So just tell us a little bit about what you do now. Who are the main people that you support, and what's your primary focus really in terms of the service you provide?
Predominantly, I am classed as a wellbeing consultant. I'm a self-appointed chief wellbeing officer of the UK, which was appointed not by me, but another good friend of mine who said, yeah, I think you should be chief wellbeing officer. Yeah. So I took it on board. But what does that ultimately mean? It means that through the reality of my own experience, I'm in a really unique position to design programs of wellbeing strategy for individuals and organizations, the length and breadth of this wonderful country of ours, and not only in the UK, but it's very much a global reach that I have. I have been really blessed and lucky over the last 29 years to train, to deliver, to facilitate amazing conversations, but also, more importantly, to promote good well-being, and more recently to deliver good awareness and positive awareness training on mental health, first aid and mental health awareness. And given my own unique experience that I've shared with you over the previous couple of hours, I think I'm in a really unique position, because as somebody who has experienced anxiety or stress or suicidal ideation or self-harm and come through that, and as very much continues to be on a journey of recovery, then I think I'm in a unique position to be able to share my knowledge, understanding, wisdom, and guidance with others in order for them to liberate where they may find themselves are at the moment.
I agree.
I'm a big ambassador, a big advocate of positive wellness and positive mental health. And that mission, vision, value, and purpose comes across in all my work, from my website to my podcast to my YouTube channel, my TikTok, my Instagram, my Facebook, wherever you might see. And as I've already said at the beginning, I had the real delight and honor of being part of a wonderful collaboration with 11 other authors, in which we wrote a mental health addition to the Rattled Awake series, volume 11, which went to the bestseller list of Amazon's book sales, albeit just for 2 weeks, but I'm taking the win. I'm taking the win. And my own book, in terms of my own journey, is going to come out later this year. And it'll be a testimony or a gospel, the good news, as it were, that I'm still alive, that I'm still here, that I've turned a real positive corner, and I'm able to do what I'm able to do, and grateful to be able to do it, and honored to be able to do it on a day-to-day basis.
Amazing. So here's a question for you then. Looking at the work that you do, and I know you work with a huge demographic, a cross-section of people. Do you feel that nowadays, obviously we've moved on since the 80s, the 90s, we would hope. But do you feel that it's easier for people to live in their truth now because society is more accepting of faiths, different cultures, different sexualities, different demographics? Or is the struggle still real? Is it just the same but different?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, in one way, it has become more simple. I think you do have that liberation and freedom of expression now, where people can live in their own truth. But sometimes, unfortunately, that gets skewed by media, and that gets skewed by those sections of our society who wish to prevent us seeing the full truth. So you have also the constant battle with fake truths and fake news and fake emails and scammers who just are out to divert you away from the purity of that truth, whatever it might be. So whether it be a war-torn conflict, everybody will have an opinion on that. Whether it be a famine, everybody will have an opinion on that. But actually, it starts with us in terms of our own truth. And if we're honest with ourselves, if we're honest with who we are as individuals, that will shine above the falsity of any other fake news that's out there. So it begins with us. And my journey has been one of come to terms with that for myself and the truth of my own experience, and I accept my truth.
That's
Truth,
self-healing, right?
that's self-healing, and that can be self-healing on a daily basis. I also, in terms of that truth, I'm conscious aware that I'm not perfect, that I do have my imperfections, that I'm human, and I accept those as well. But in acceptance, I also have a responsibility to work in those areas of my life to be the best version of me that I can be, right?
Yeah.
And that, in terms of my expression, is where I find myself, be it from a spiritual point of view, be it from a professional point of view, be it from a personal point of view. And I do have that responsibility and take that responsibility on board. But I would say, and I feel sometimes really sorry for our young people who live in this world right now and who are surrounded by so much noise and influence and distraction 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year from every angle. You just can't get away from it. And I think it's only when you pull aside from that and get that support and get that time and that space to be with you and find out who you really are, it's then that real growth and discovery takes place.
Yeah, agreed. And if you could go back to your younger self and give him some advice, that young lad that was being pushed towards the priesthood, that little miracle, what would you say to him?
Well, what would I say to him in the room? I would say, don't be as hard on yourself. Be gentle with you. Listen to your heart. Be honest with yourself. Yeah. And the truth ultimately, Fran, does set us free. It's when we sit with our truth and when we accept the truth of our situation, then as painful as it is and as difficult as it is, if we accept it, that will ultimately liberate us.
Amazing. Okay, we're pretty much done, I think, for today because we've been talking for ages, as always. So a few quick fire questions for you.
Yeah.
Are you ready?
Yeah.
What was the last little white lie you told?
I only had 3 bits of KFC.
How many did you actually have, Seamus Corry? 4. Coffee or tea?
Tea.
What's one book that shaped your thinking above all else?
The 10 Commandments to Personal Empowerment by Dana Sardano.
And your go-to song if you need a lift?
My go-to song if I need a lift. Oh my God, there are so many.
If I had to say now, put one song on.
Yeah, it would have to be Bon Jovi, a real rock song. Living on a Prayer. Let's go for Living on a Prayer. Anything by Bon Jovi.
Interesting.
And can I also say the biggest album that influenced me during our discussion, my transition from Ireland to the UK, had to be Alanis Morissette's A Jagged Little Pill. That was my go-to Bible, direction of travel, and album of choice.
I loved that album. I loved it.
Love
And
that album.
I saw Alanis Morissette for the 25th anniversary of Jagged Little Pill at the O2. We were supposed to be 2020, it got cancelled and rescheduled for the following year. And I got COVID for the first time at her concert.
No.
But man, it was worth it. She was incredible. And every person in the O2 knew every word to every song. I have never experienced anything like it. It was phenomenal.
Alanis, if you're listening to this, if you happen to tap in, tag her in a wee segment. Alanis, you saved my life, girl.
Oh, wow.
You saved my life. Your album saved my life.
Wow. And what's a phrase you live by to finish?
If it's got to be, it's down to me.
Seamus Corry, thank you.
You're welcome, my love.
Over and out.